while my sister posed for photos behind a $320,000 wedding reception. I stood in the corner of a ballroom at the Umstead Hotel in Raleigh, North Carolina. Crystal chandeliers hung above nearly 200 guests. White orchids crowned every table, and filet mignon cooled untouched on polished china. I was wearing an $89 black dress from Nordstrom Rack, holding a thin envelope that was supposed to be my mother's answer to the question I had asked 20 minutes earlier. "Would you help me and Daniel the way you helped Victoria?" But the check wasn't the real reason I walked out that night. The reason came from what she said next to the man standing beside me, the man who would later help me build everything she once insisted I would never have. Leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. My name is Hermina Coleman. I'm 30 years old now. But to understand how everything changed, you have to go back 2 years to a Saturday in June, inside that ballroom in Raleigh. That was the night I stopped trying to earn my mother's love. I grew up in Cary, North Carolina, the kind of suburb where every lawn is trimmed to the same height and every family photo hangs perfectly above the fireplace. Our house was a 4-bedroom colonial on a quiet, tree-lined street with a 2-car garage and a golden retriever named Baxter. From the outside, the Coleman family looked like something out of a catalog. Inside, we lived by a quiet but rigid ranking system. My older sister, Victoria Coleman, was the model everyone followed. Straight-A student, captain of the varsity lacrosse team, early admission to Johns Hopkins. She moved through life with the easy confidence of someone who had been told since childhood that the world belonged to her. And she believed it, because our mother made sure she did. My mother, Frances Coleman, 58, had once worked as a surgical nurse. She had dreamed of going to medical school but never applied. All of that unfulfilled ambition poured straight into Victoria, like concrete filling a mold. Over time, Victoria became exactly what our mother wanted: a dermatologist with her own practice, a boyfriend from the right family, and a smile that looked perfect in holiday photos. Then there was me. I was the daughter who drew instead of studied, the one who won an art contest in sophomore year and carried the ribbon home to a dinner table that barely reacted. My mother glanced at it the way someone glances at a coupon they know they'll never use. "That's nice, Hermina," she said. "But creativity is a luxury, stability is a responsibility." The ribbon went into my bedroom drawer. Victoria's lacrosse trophies, her honor roll certificates, her Johns Hopkins acceptance letter, all of those were displayed in the glass cabinet in the living room where every guest could see them the moment they stepped inside. That was the point. One daughter would save lives. The other drew pictures. You can probably guess which one got mentioned at Thanksgiving. I graduated from the University of North Carolina with a communications degree and a GPA my family never once asked about. I found a job as a junior marketing coordinator at a small agency in Raleigh, Harrison & Cole Marketing. 11 employees, a modest office above a sandwich shop on Glenwood Avenue, and a salary of $38,000 a year before taxes. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. The real problem was transportation. Raleigh's public transit didn't reach the suburbs where many of my clients were located. I needed a car, but my credit history was thin. A student card with a $2,000 limit and only 6 months of consistent rent payments. Not enough to qualify for a loan on my own. So my parents co-signed. $22,000 for a used 2019 Honda Civic with 62,000 miles on it. My monthly payment was $312. On paper, it looked generous. In reality, it was a leash. My mother kept the co-sign agreement in the drawer beside her bed the way some people keep a loaded weapon. Every Thanksgiving, every phone call where I hinted that I wanted something different, every moment I pushed back against her opinions, that leash tightened. "You still owe us for that car, Hermina," she would remind me. "Don't bite the hand that co-signed your loan." My father, Albert Coleman, 60 years old and newly retired from a career in sales management, handled conflict by avoiding it. He would sit at the table quietly, reading the newspaper. He chewed slowly, stared at his plate, and when my mother finished speaking, he would add one careful sentence. "Your mother has a point." He never clarified which point he meant. Every holiday, the Honda Civic sat in our parents' driveway beside the BMW X5 they had given Victoria as a graduation gift when she finished medical school. Two cars side by side, one earned, one bestowed. They told the truth about our place in the family. I met Daniel Brooks in a coffee shop on Fayetteville Street, one of those places with mismatched mugs and a chalkboard menu that changed every morning. He sat by the window with a laptop open to a design program, a half-finished cold brew sweating on the table beside him. There was a calm confidence about him that I initially mistook for indifference until he looked up and smiled. Daniel was 29, a freelance UX designer. He had been supporting himself since he was 18. His parents divorced when he was 14. His mother moved to Florida. His father disappeared into alcohol. Daniel paid his own way through community college, taught himself digital design, and built a client list one cold email at a time. His emergency fund was modest, but the fact that he even had one already put him ahead of most people our age. What I admired most about Daniel wasn't ambition in the way my mother defined it. He didn't chase corner offices or executive titles. His ambition showed up quietly every day, in his work, in our relationship, in the life we were slowly assembling together inside a one-bedroom apartment filled with secondhand furniture and a budget spreadsheet taped to the refrigerator door. My mother discovered Daniel 3 months after we started dating. Her reaction came during Sunday pot roast. "A freelancer?" she asked, placing her fork down carefully as if presenting evidence in a courtroom. "So neither of you actually has a real job." That same month, Victoria got engaged to Dr. Nathan Whitaker, an orthopedic surgeon from an old money family. He wore Ferragamo loafers, had a politician's smile, and the kind of jawline that looked designed for campaign posters. My mother hosted their engagement dinner herself. Champagne flowed. A caterer served dinner in the backyard. 40 guests filled the garden. "Victoria found a partner who matches her ambition," my mother said that evening, glancing briefly toward Daniel across the lawn. "You found a partner who matches your situation." Daniel heard every word. He didn't react outwardly, but I saw the muscle in his jaw tighten the way it does when someone swallows an insult they'll never forget. 5 weeks before Victoria's wedding, Daniel proposed. There were no rooftop fireworks or hidden rings in champagne glasses. It happened on a quiet Tuesday night in our apartment. Pasta simmered on the stove, rain tapped against the windows. "I don't have a speech," he said simply. "I just know I want this life. You, this, us." The ring was a small solitaire he had been saving for over 4 months. I said yes before he even finished the sentence. We told my family the following Sunday. Victoria smiled politely, though it never reached her eyes. My father said, "That's wonderful, sweetheart," before returning to his newspaper. My mother looked at the ring for exactly 1 second, then turned to Victoria. "Did you confirm the florist for the orchids?" By then, the wedding planning had already become unstoppable. The Umstead Hotel in Raleigh, a planner flown in from New York, orchids imported from Ecuador instead of roses, because Victoria said roses were predictable. The budget had climbed past $320,000, and my mother talked about it the way people discuss home renovations: necessary, overdue, an investment in the right things. My role in the wedding wasn't discussed, it was assigned. I would manage the guest book table, a small podium by the entrance, far from the ceremony, far from the reception, far from every photograph. My job that night was simple. I greeted guests, handed them a pen, and kept smiling. A week before the wedding, Victoria had sent me a text. "You can bring Daniel. Just make sure he doesn't start talking about freelancing with Nathan's colleagues. It's not really the same world." I stared at that message for a long time. I should have responded. I should have said something. I didn't. The wedding was 5 weeks away, and at the time I had no idea it would be the last time I ever sat comfortably at my family's table. The ballroom at the Umstead Hotel in Raleigh seemed designed to remind everyone exactly how much money had been spent. Crystal chandeliers hung low above long tables dressed in white linen. Each centerpiece rose in a sculpted tower of white peonies and trailing jasmine, with tall candles burning beside them and filling the air with tuberose and warm cedar. A string quartet played softly in the corner. Nearly 200 guests in cocktail attire filled the room. Gold-rimmed chargers gleamed beneath the place settings, each place laid with 3 forks. I arrived early, exactly as instructed. My dress was black, simple, cap-sleeved, bought online from Nordstrom Rack during a 70% clearance sale. $89. I had tried it on 3 times in our bathroom mirror before deciding it would do. It was always going to be enough. No one was there to look at me anyway. Victoria glided through the ceremony wearing a custom Vera Wang gown, her cathedral veil trailing behind her like a promise the world had already agreed to keep. She looked beautiful. She always did. My mother, Frances Coleman, stood in the front row wearing champagne silk, pressing a monogrammed handkerchief to her eyes. And I remember thinking one simple thing as I watched her. She has never looked at me the way she is looking at Victoria right now. Not once. After the ceremony, I took my place at the guest book table. I smiled. I passed out pens. I congratulated strangers who had no idea who I was. One of my mother's cousins, Linda Carter, leaned over the book as she signed. She wore pearls and smelled faintly of Pinot Grigio. She squinted up at me. "Oh, you're the other one." I kept smiling. "I'm Hermina." Right, she said with a small laugh. "Frances always talks about Victoria. She's the star of the family, isn't she?" Across the room, Daniel Brooks sat at table 14 near the service entrance. He was seated beside 2 of Nathan Whitaker's distant colleagues who spent most of the evening discussing golf handicaps. By the time the speeches finished and Victoria and Nathan took their first dance to Sinatra, the room had that loose champagne glow that settles over expensive parties once everyone knows the bill has already been paid. I stepped away from the guest book table and went looking for Daniel. I just wanted to sit beside him for a few minutes, maybe eat something, maybe steal one quiet moment before the night ended. I only made it halfway across the ballroom before my mother appeared beside me. "Hermina, come here." She guided me toward a corner near the bar. It wasn't fully private. A few guests at a nearby high-top table could easily hear us. A waiter was restocking champagne flutes only a few feet away. "I understand you and Daniel are planning something," she said. Her tone sounded exactly like the one she used when I was 12, and she caught me sketching instead of finishing my algebra homework. Disappointed, but never surprised. "You asked last week if we would help with your wedding," she continued. "So here." She placed a small white envelope in my hand, standard size. Light. I opened it. Inside was a check written in my mother's careful cursive. $800. On the memo line she had written, "Wedding contribution, Hermina." I looked up. She was watching my face with the clinical curiosity of someone observing a laboratory experiment. "That's all you deserve," she said quietly, barely louder than the music. But the waiter heard it. I saw his hand pause mid-air over a champagne glass. A woman at the nearby table glanced in our direction and then quickly looked away, the way people do when they realize they've witnessed something they wish they hadn't. My sister had received $320,000 for her wedding. I had been given $800. The memo line made it official. I folded the check carefully, slipped it into my clutch, and met my mother's eyes. I didn't say a word. Somehow that silence unsettled her more than anything I could have said. Then I walked back to table 14. Daniel saw my expression before I even sat down. His hand slid under the table and closed gently around mine. "What happened?" he asked. "Later," I said softly. "Not here. But here found us anyway." 10 minutes later, my mother approached our table. She had finished another glass of champagne. Not enough to slur her words, but enough to dissolve the thin layer of restraint she normally kept in place. She stood at the head of the table. 6 strangers turned to look at her, then she looked directly at Daniel, not at me, at him. "I hope you're not expecting us to fund your wedding as well," she said with a smile sharp enough to cut glass. "We don't invest in dead ends." The table went silent. A man in a Brooks Brothers blazer stared down into his water glass. A woman beside him suddenly became very interested in her napkin. One of Nathan's college friends opened his mouth as if to speak, then thought better of it. Daniel didn't move. He didn't raise his voice. but I could see the tendon in his neck tighten the way a guitar string does just before it snaps, and something inside me shifted, not shattered, opened. There's a difference. I could endure the rankings, the glass cabinet in the living room, the guest book table, the $89 dress, even the $800 check. But this man beside me had built his life from nothing. He had never asked my family for a single dollar. He didn't deserve to be humiliated in public by someone who had barely bothered to learn his name 3 months earlier. I stood and leaned toward him. "We're leaving." Daniel nodded immediately, no hesitation. As we crossed the parking lot, gravel crunching beneath our shoes, I spoke the first clear sentence I had managed all evening. "I'm refinancing that car loan tomorrow." Daniel opened the passenger door of my Honda Civic and smiled faintly. I already pulled up the paperwork on my laptop. By 7 the next morning, my phone was already lighting up. 12 missed calls from my father, 3 text messages from Victoria, and 1 heavy silence from my mother that somehow spoke louder than all of them combined. My father's message came first. "Hermina, please call us. Your mother is upset." Victoria followed quickly after. "You left early and everyone noticed. People kept asking where you went. You ruined my reception, Hermina. I hope you're happy." Then another. This was supposed to be my day. And from my mother, Frances Coleman, nothing at all. Because my mother didn't chase people. She waited. She expected you to come back, apologize, and restore the order she believed the world should run on. I didn't respond to any of them. Daniel and I were sitting at our tiny kitchen table, the cheap one from Target with the uneven leg that always tilted slightly to the left. His laptop sat between us, while 2 cups of coffee slowly went cold. On the screen were refinancing options for my car loan. In the corner of the browser, my credit score glowed, 680, borderline. Not great, but just enough. "If we go through a credit union," Daniel said, scrolling through the numbers, "we can probably get about 7.2%. It's higher than what your parents got originally, but the loan transfers completely into your name. They're removed from the title." He looked up. "Clean break." The words hung in the air like something sacred. I stared at the loan amount on the screen, about $22,000. For the first time I saw it clearly, not just as debt, as a chain. A chain my mother had been rattling every time I dared to push back. And here was Daniel, sitting across from me at 7 in the morning, already pulling up the paperwork that could cut it loose. I stared again at the number in the corner of the screen, 680. And I thought, why did I let a $22,000 loan keep me tied to a family that valued me at $800? Have you ever realized that the thing trapping you was smaller than you thought? That sometimes the lock costs less than the cage? In 72 hours, I had a plan. Within 30 days, I would have a new city. 2 weeks after the wedding, the story about me had already been written, just not by me. My Aunt Margaret Coleman, my father's sister, called one Wednesday afternoon. She was the quiet one in the family, the kind who sent birthday cards with $10 bills tucked inside and never picked sides. She didn't bother with hello. "I thought you should know what your mother is telling people." The version of events my mother had created was neat, efficient, and completely false. According to her, I had stormed out of the wedding in a jealous rage. I couldn't handle seeing Victoria happy. I had always been the difficult daughter. My parents had offered to help financially, and I had thrown their generosity back in their faces. That version spread everywhere, at family dinners, on phone calls with cousins, in quiet conversations at the grocery store with neighbors who had known us since childhood. It spread exactly the way my mother intended, quietly, completely, like glue behind wallpaper. Then came Instagram. Victoria posted a photo from her honeymoon in Maui. She was standing at the front of a chartered boat, Dior sunglasses pushed up into her hair, Nathan Whitaker's arm wrapped around her waist, while the Pacific glittered behind them. The caption read, "Grateful for family who actually shows up. Some people just can't handle other people's blessings." Emojis, fire emojis. "You handled that with such grace, living your best life. I only saw the post because a friend from college screenshot it and sent it to me with a single question mark. I stared at the photo for about 10 seconds. Then I closed the app, opened my laptop, and returned to the email I had been drafting to a potential client, a small bakery in Nashville that needed help managing its social media. Later that week, Aunt Margaret sent one more message. I saw what happened at the wedding. Your mother was wrong, that's all I'll say. She wasn't exactly an ally, just a witness. Sometimes that's enough to keep you from questioning your own sanity. They can keep the story, I told Daniel that night. I'll keep the results. 3 weeks after the wedding, my phone rang again on a Thursday evening. 9 days earlier, I had submitted my refinancing application to a credit union. When I saw the name on the screen, my stomach dropped the way it does when a fire alarm suddenly goes off in a building you thought was safe. Mom. My mother rarely called. She summoned. She waited. Silence was usually her weapon of choice. The fact that she was calling meant she had heard something she didn't like. I understand you're planning to move, she said once I answered. Her voice was calm, measured, the same tone she used with pharmaceutical sales reps who showed up with the wrong samples. Someone told me you're looking at apartments out of state. I didn't answer. I let the silence stretch. If you leave, she continued, don't expect us to keep co-signing that loan. I'll call the bank Monday morning. You can't remove yourself from a co-signed loan like that, Mom, I said quietly. That's not how it works. There was a pause. I had never pushed back with facts before. The words landed between us like a stone dropped into still water. Excuse me? She said. It's a binding contract, I replied, keeping my voice steady the way Daniel had coached me the night before. You can't just withdraw your name without the lender's approval and a refinance. I paused, which I've already started. The silence on the other end of the line changed. This time it wasn't the silence of control. It was the silence of someone reaching for a lever and discovering it wasn't there anymore. 5 days later, the credit union approved the refinance. 7.2% interest. Higher than before. I didn't care. The loan transferred completely into my name. Albert and Frances Coleman were removed from the title entirely. I sent a single email. Mom, Dad, the auto loan has been refinanced under my name. You're no longer on it. Thank you for the original cosign, Hermina Professional. Short, emotionless. The leash was gone. 30 days after the wedding, I packed everything I owned into my Honda Civic. It didn't take long. 2 suitcases, a box of marketing textbooks, my laptop, a folder of client samples from Harrison and Cole Marketing, and a small cactus Daniel had given me for our first anniversary that had somehow survived 2 Carolina winters on a windowsill. I had turned in my notice at the agency the week before. My boss, Stephen Wallace, a decent man who wore the same blue Oxford shirt every Tuesday, shook my hand. You're better than this place, Hermina, he said. I'm sorry we couldn't pay you enough to prove it. He wrote me a reference letter that same afternoon. By then, Daniel had already transitioned his freelance design clients to fully remote work. His laptop didn't care whether it was sitting in Raleigh or somewhere else entirely. That was the beauty of his work, and the one thing my mother never understood about it. His job could travel. We chose Nashville, Tennessee, because Daniel had done the math. No state income tax. The cost of living noticeably lower than what we had been paying in North Carolina. A growing startup culture that welcomed small operators. A creative scene where nobody asked about your pedigree before they asked about your ideas. The morning we left, our entire bank balance was $6,500. Every dollar we had. As we crossed the state line into Tennessee, my father sent a message. Are you safe? I waited until we stopped for gas outside Knoxville before replying. One word, yes. There was nothing from my mother, nothing from Victoria. Only my father asking the question he probably should have been asking for 30 years. The interstate stretched endlessly ahead of us. Long miles of highway, exit signs, truck stops, and late afternoon sunlight sliding across the windshield. In the rearview mirror, Raleigh slowly disappeared. Ahead, a green highway sign read, Nashville, 138 miles. You okay? Daniel asked. Ask me in a year, I said. Our first apartment in East Nashville was a tiny studio, 480 square feet of warped hardwood floors, an air conditioner that rattled like an old diesel engine, and a window that looked out over a parking lot where someone had spray-painted "Dream Big" on the side of a dumpster. Rent was $900 a month. We didn't even have a bed at first. Daniel borrowed an air mattress from a designer he'd met through an online forum who happened to live across town. That first night we lay side by side listening to the air conditioner struggle through its cycles. I stared up at the ceiling where a water stain in the corner looked oddly like a crooked heart, and a thought slipped quietly into my mind. What if my mother was right? I didn't say it out loud. I didn't need to. Daniel rolled onto his side and looked at me. It's going to get better, he said calmly. It has to. We didn't come all this way to quit. The next morning I started working. Barista at a coffee shop in the 12 South District. $12 an hour plus tips. The owner was a woman named Patricia Gomez, who made her own oat milk and called every customer honey. I worked the espresso machine from 6 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon. Then I came home, showered, and sat at the narrow kitchen counter that doubled as our dining table, my desk, and sometimes our grocery storage. I opened my laptop and logged into freelance platforms. The first month I landed 3 small jobs: social media management for a nail salon in Franklin, $400, a promotional flyer for a food truck called Smoky Joe's BBQ, $250, an email campaign for a yoga studio near Music Row, $750. Total freelance income that month, $1,400. Combined with my barista tips and Daniel's UX contracts, we barely cleared rent. Groceries came from the cheapest aisles of the supermarket, and I discovered that rice, beans, and stubborn optimism could stretch much further than I ever imagined. Freedom tastes very different when you can't afford furniture. 3 months after arriving in Nashville, something finally shifted. I signed my first real contract, not a freelance gig, a proper client with a defined scope of work and a signed agreement. A boutique hotel in the Gulch called Magnolia Hotel. 12 rooms, exposed brick walls, and a rooftop bar serving cocktails to tourists who wanted to pretend they were locals. The owner wanted a full brand refresh, new logo, social media strategy, website copy, fee, $4,200. I called Daniel from the parking lot after signing the contract and nearly cried. 3 weeks later, the project collapsed. The owner, Ronald Bishop, liked linen shirts and changed his mind the way some people change socks. First, he didn't like the color palette, then the typography, then the overall vibe. He canceled the project entirely, paid the 50% kill fee, and hired a friend from Los Angeles who offered to do it for free. $2,100. 3 weeks of work, gone. After accounting for $200 I had already spent on design software and stock photos, the victory felt hollow. That evening I sat outside our apartment building on the concrete steps, holding a bottle of water while traffic crawled past on the street. Daniel came out a few minutes later with coffee from Patricia's cafe. The good stuff. He had earned the tip money helping her reorganize the storage room earlier that day. He sat beside me. "Hey," he said gently. "Your credit score hit 710 last month. The refinance is working." I nodded slowly. He added, "Also remember that woman at the cafe? The one who asked about your food truck campaign for Smoky Joe's BBQ, Eleanor something?" "Eleanor who?" "I don't know yet," he said. "But she left her card. Said your Smoky Joe's campaign was the best local marketing she'd seen in 6 months. He handed it to me. I held the card carefully between my fingers, as if it might dissolve. Eleanor Hayes, marketing consultant, Nashville, Tennessee. Back inside the apartment, I pinned Ronald Bishop's $2,100 check to the kitchen wall with a magnet. Beneath it I wrote in black marker, "First real payment, first real lesson." I never searched for Victoria's Instagram. The algorithm found me anyway. One night in April, I was sitting cross-legged on the air mattress, because we still didn't own a couch, scrolling through hospitality marketing accounts for inspiration. Suddenly, the app decided I might enjoy seeing my sister. Victoria stood in the kitchen of her new home. 4-bedroom colonial house. Marble island. Brass pendant lights. Fresh white subway tile backsplash that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Caption: Dream home with my dream man. The house was in Chapel Hill, purchased with the $320,000 wedding gift as a down payment, and a mortgage Nathan Whitaker had signed alongside her. My parents' investment was apparently appreciating nicely. I was about to close the app when something caught my attention. The post had fewer likes than Victoria's usual content. She had almost 200,000 followers, patients, influencers, lifestyle accounts. "I haven't seen you two together in a while." Victoria replied, "He's busy saving lives." The exclamation marks were doing a lot of work. I closed the app and opened my laptop again. I had a proposal to finish for a small bed and breakfast near Gatlinburg that needed help improving its booking funnel. Victoria's kitchen had a 6-burner wolf range. I was sitting at a cheap IKEA table I had assembled twice because I kept putting the legs on backward. One leg was slightly shorter, so my laptop always tilted just a little to the left. Every email I had written for 4 months had been typed at an angle. What I didn't know yet was that Victoria's dream house had already dropped nearly $60,000 below its purchase value. The local housing market had softened, and Nathan Whitaker wasn't busy saving lives. He was busy quietly destroying theirs. May was the month that nearly broke us. We had been in Nashville for 5 months, and the numbers in my banking app looked less like a balance and more like a countdown. $2,100 in checking. Rent was due in 6 days, $900. After that, we would have about $1,200 left for everything else. Groceries, gas, phone bills, internet for freelance work, and the Canva Pro subscription I couldn't cancel without losing access to the templates my clients depended on. Then Daniel lost his biggest client, a fintech startup in San Francisco that had been paying him $4,000 a month for UX work sent a 2-line email. "We're restructuring our design budget. Effective immediately, we're pausing all contractor agreements. Thanks for everything." Thanks for everything is the corporate version of a shrug. That month, our combined income dropped almost 40%. We ate rice and black beans 4 nights in a row. Daniel picked up a 1-day side job helping Patricia Gomez build shelving at the cafe. $200 cash, paid the same afternoon. I took a rush job for a real estate agent in Franklin who needed Instagram content. $300 for 15 posts. I finished the entire batch in 1 night, fueled by instant coffee and the uneasy mix of determination and fear that had become my daily routine. One evening, while Daniel was on a call with a potential client, I walked into the bathroom, shut the door, turned on the faucet, and cried, not quietly. The kind of crying where your whole body folds in on itself, and the sound coming out doesn't even feel like your own voice. The bathroom was tiny. White tile, yellowing grout, a faucet that dripped every few seconds. I pressed my face into a towel and let it happen. When I came out, Daniel was still on his call. I washed my face and opened my email. There was one new message, from Eleanor Hayes. "Your Smokey Joe's BBQ campaign was sharper than I expected. I've been watching your recent work. Come to my office Thursday. I might have something for you." I read it 3 times, then once more. I didn't realize it yet, but that meeting would change the direction of everything. Eleanor Hayes worked out of a 3rd-floor office in a co-working building near Broadway, Nashville, the kind of place where every door had a different startup name and the communal kitchen always smelled like someone's overambitious pour-over coffee. Her office itself was small and deliberately minimal. A standing desk, 2 chairs, 1 white orchid on the windowsill. Nothing on the walls except a framed Ad Age magazine cover from 2014 with her name printed beneath the headline. Eleanor was 52, a silver bob cut so precise it looked surgical, navy blazer over a white t-shirt. No jewelry except a Cartier tank watch on her wrist that flashed under the lights whenever she moved her hand, which was often, because Eleanor spoke the way she worked, direct, fast, no wasted motion. No. Your Smokey Joe's BBQ campaign increased their weekend foot traffic by 34%, she said before I had even finished sitting down. I called the owner. He confirmed the numbers. She paused and studied me carefully. That's not luck. Then she leaned back slightly. But your pricing is amateur. The word landed harder than I expected. You charge $250 for work worth at least $2,000, she continued. When you price yourself that low, you're telling clients you don't believe in your own value. Her words cut closer than she realized. Here's what I'm offering, she said. I have 2 hospitality clients, Belmont House Hotel in the Gulch and a bed and breakfast in Gatlinburg. Both need a social media strategy and brand refresh. I'll refer you. She lifted her wrist slightly and glanced at the watch. But only if you come back with a real proposal, real pricing, and a registered LLC. She held my gaze. Not a freelancer with a profile. A business. Another glance at the watch. You have 48 hours. I stood, my hands trembling slightly. Thank you, Eleanor. Don't thank me, she said calmly. Earn it. I don't refer sloppy work. I sat in my car in the parking lot and immediately called Daniel. I need you to help me register an LLC tonight. That evening we were back at our uneven IKEA table, Daniel's laptop open to the Tennessee Business Registration website. The process was surprisingly simple. Business name, registered agent, address, purpose. The filing fee was $300. We had $1,200 left in our account. That's a quarter of what we have, I said quietly. It's an investment, Daniel replied. Not an expense. I typed the name into the form, Coleman Creative Group LLC. Daniel looked at the screen. You're using your family name. It's my name too, I said, and I'm going to make it mean something different. He didn't argue. He clicked submit. The charge went through. $300. Less than half of what my mother believed I was worth at my sister's wedding. Over the next 48 hours, I built 2 proposals in Google Docs. One for Magnolia Hotel in the Gulch, one for Cedar Creek Inn in Gatlinburg. I priced each project at $6,000. My fingers hovered over the numbers. Eleanor's voice echoed in my head. You're telling clients you don't believe in your own value. I left the numbers exactly where they were. I emailed the proposals to Eleanor at 11:47 p.m. on Saturday, 13 minutes before her deadline. Monday morning, Magnolia Hotel replied. Let's do it. Tuesday afternoon, Cedar Creek Inn responded. Can we start next week? Just like that, $12,000 was in the pipeline. More money than I had ever earned in a single month of my life. I quit the cafe job that Friday. Patricia hugged me across the espresso machine. Go be somebody, honey, she said, and send me a client if you can. I printed the Coleman Creative Group LLC certificate at an Office Depot and pinned it to the wall in our apartment kitchen, right next to the $2,100 check from the canceled hotel project. My wall of evidence. Not of failure, of becoming. Things didn't suddenly get easy after that. They got fast. By August, 3 months after registering the company, Coleman Creative Group had 4 active clients. Monthly revenue, $27,000. By late summer, the work had started to grow faster than I expected. I hired my first contractor, a copywriter named Melissa Grant, who had recently moved to Nashville and wrote headlines the way some people write poetry, clean, precise, and impossible to ignore. I paid her fairly because I remembered exactly how it felt when someone didn't. By October, we had 7 clients. Eleanor Hayes introduced me to the Tennessee Hospitality Network, a group of hotel owners, restaurant operators, and tourism executives who met quarterly over overpriced salads at a restaurant near Broadway, Nashville. She gave me one piece of advice before the meeting. Don't charm them, she said. Show them numbers. So I did. I stood in front of 40 business owners wearing a borrowed blazer and walked them through the data. My hands shook for the first 90 seconds. Then the numbers took over. Smokey Joe's BBQ had increased weekend foot traffic by 34%. Magnolia Hotel had seen its Instagram engagement jump 200%. Cedar Creek Inn had boosted direct bookings 41% in 2 months. By the time I finished, 3 people had quietly placed business cards on my chair. December revenue for that month reached $46,000. I hired another contractor soon after, a graphic designer named Lucas Turner. Daniel and I moved out of the cramped East Nashville studio and into a 2-bedroom apartment nearby. One room became my office. For the first time, I had a real desk, a proper chair, and a real bed, a queen-sized oak frame we assembled together on a quiet Sunday afternoon while Daniel played Coldplay through a small Bluetooth speaker. Around Christmas, my father sent me an email. "Merry Christmas, Hermina. I hope Nashville is treating you well." I replied with the first words I had sent him in 6 months. "For the first time, it is." "Merry Christmas, Dad." Short, but not closed. Every invoice I sent felt like a sentence in a letter I was writing to my future self. After 1 full year in Nashville, Coleman Creative Group had 12 retainer clients, 2 full-time employees besides me, and a revenue number I had to read 3 times before I believed it. $610,000 gross revenue. Not profit, I want to be honest about that. After salaries, software subscriptions, contractor fees, and taxes, the take-home amount was far smaller. But the trajectory was real. For the first time in my life, the graph was rising because of something I had built myself. We leased a small 800-square-foot office in the Gulch, a converted storefront with exposed ductwork, polished concrete floors, and a glass front door. Daniel designed the company logo himself. Coleman Creative Group clean sans serif lettering in slate gray across frosted glass. On the first morning we opened the office, I stood outside on the sidewalk and watched the Nashville sunlight hit those letters. The reflections stretched across the floor inside, like a shadow in reverse. That was the same month Daniel proposed again, properly this time. We had technically been engaged since that quiet Tuesday night in our apartment before everything changed, but we had never celebrated it. He took me to a rooftop bar overlooking the river at sunset and said simply, "We should make this official, not for anyone else, for us." We were married the following Wednesday at the Davidson County Courthouse. 15 guests. Eleanor attended wearing her usual navy blazer. Patricia Gomez from the cafe brought a cake she had baked herself. No Vera Wang. No imported orchids. No $320,000 wedding budget. Just a $90 filing fee and a promise. 2 weeks later, I received an email from the Nashville Business Review. "Ms. Coleman, you've been nominated for our annual 40 Under 40 list. Would you be available for an interview?" I said yes. At that point, I had no idea who else would be in Nashville by the time the awards ceremony took place. Victoria arrived in the city that October, though not by choice. Her husband, Nathan Whitaker, had accepted a position at a hospital network affiliated with Vanderbilt. Accepted was the word Victoria used publicly. Later, I learned the truth was more complicated. His department in North Carolina had quietly encouraged him to relocate after an HR complaint from a colleague. The details didn't reach me then. They didn't need to. The outcome was the same. Nathan Whitaker was moving to Tennessee. Victoria was coming with him. They sold their house in Chapel Hill, the one my parents had effectively purchased with that $320,000 wedding gift. The housing market had softened steadily. The mortgage terms aged badly. By the time closing costs and realtor fees were paid, Victoria and Nathan walked away with almost nothing. $350,000 gone, not stolen, not gambled, just quietly dissolved by a market that didn't care about wedding gifts or parental expectations. Victoria didn't know I was living in Nashville. I had no personal social media accounts. Coleman Creative Group had a website and a business Instagram page, but Victoria had no reason to search for a marketing agency. Our worlds didn't overlap, or at least that's what I believed. The overlap happened on a Tuesday afternoon. My mother had flown into Nashville to help Victoria and Nathan settle into their temporary rental. The 3 of them were driving down a street in the Gulch when Victoria looked out the window. "That's a nice office space," she said. My mother glanced up. She saw the glass door. She saw the name, Coleman Creative Group. She pulled out her phone and searched it. My website appeared. My photo on the About page, Hermina Coleman, founder and CEO. My mother lowered the phone slowly into her lap. For the first time in her life, she had nothing to say. The Nashville Business Review, 40 Under 40 Gala, took place on a Thursday evening in November at the JW Marriott, Nashville. The rooftop terrace overlooked the city skyline 34 floors below, lights stretching across the river like a circuit board. 400 guests filled the space: founders, investors, hospital administrators, tech executives, city council members. There was an open bar, a small jazz trio, and thick name tags printed on heavy cardstock that felt almost ceremonial just to hold. I wore red. Not bright red, deep, arterial red. A tailored blazer made by a seamstress in 12 South, paired with a simple black silk blouse. My hair pulled back into a clean low bun. Red lipstick to match the jacket. Daniel stood beside me wearing the first navy suit he had ever owned that wasn't rented. Eleanor had picked the tie for him. Charcoal gray, slim, no pattern. "You want people to remember your face," she had told him, "not your tie." We arrived at 7, checked in, and found our table. Table 3, front section. 1 year earlier, I had been sitting at table 14 by the service door at my sister's wedding. The symmetry wasn't lost on me. Eleanor was already seated at the VIP table, speaking to the editor-in-chief of the Nashville Business Review, with the calm authority of someone running a board meeting nobody had officially called. What I didn't know, as I adjusted my blazer and scanned the room, was that 6 tables behind me, near the back bar, Nathan Whitaker had just taken his seat. The hospital system that had recruited Nathan Whitaker happened to be a platinum sponsor of the event, so his invitation came through the hospital's medical staff liaison. Nathan sat near the back of the room beside Victoria, while my mother, Frances Coleman, had extended her visit to help Victoria settle into the city and now sat between them. Her champagne-colored blouse was almost identical to the one she had worn at Victoria's wedding. The MC stepped up to the podium. The room quieted as the names began. They called the honorees alphabetically: Carter, Daniels, Foster, Gutierrez. Each person walked to the stage, shook hands with the host, received a crystal award, and said a few brief words. Polite applause followed each speech. Cameras flashed. Conversations resumed in soft murmurs between announcements. Then the MC leaned toward the microphone again. Next, founder and CEO of Coleman Creative Group, one of Nashville's fastest-growing hospitality marketing firms, with revenue surpassing $2.8 million in its second year, Hermina Coleman. 400 people began applauding. I stood. My legs were steady. My hands were steady. 2 years earlier, those same hands had been clutching an $800 check in the corner of a wedding ballroom. Tonight, they smoothed the front of a red blazer tailored to fit like it had been waiting for me all along. I walked to the stage. The spotlight was warm. The crystal award felt heavier than it looked. 6 tables back near the bar, my mother's champagne flute froze halfway to her lips. Victoria turned toward her. "Wait, Coleman Creative, is that—" My mother didn't answer. I stepped to the microphone. I didn't look for them. I didn't need to. 2 years ago, I began, my voice calm and clear. I drove to Nashville with $6,500 and a Honda Civic. 400 faces looked up at me. I didn't have a backup plan. I had a partner who believed in me, a mentor who pushed me harder than anyone ever had, and a decision to stop waiting for permission to build my own life. I paused and let the room hold the silence. "Legacy isn't what you inherit," I said. "It's what you build." The applause was louder this time. Daniel stood first. Eleanor nodded quietly from the VIP table, offering the smallest smile, the one she reserved for work that actually met her standards. I returned to table 3. As I sat down, my eyes drifted across the room, over hundreds of faces and flickering candlelight and the glowing skyline beyond the glass. For just 1 second, my gaze landed on my mother. She was staring directly at me. I held her eyes for a moment and gave a small nod, the kind you offer someone you recognize but haven't spoken to in years. Then I turned back to Daniel and let the evening continue without her. What happened afterward reached me through family channels. My Aunt Margaret Coleman heard it from my father Albert, who had received a phone call from my mother at 10:47 that night. In our family, stories always traveled quietly along the same invisible telephone line, carrying just enough detail to sting. The gala ended around 10. Victoria and my mother walked down to the parking garage in silence while Nathan stayed upstairs networking, or doing whatever Nathan called it when his wife wasn't watching. The garage was underground. Concrete walls, fluorescent lights humming overhead, no chandeliers, no string quartet, no Instagram filters to soften the moment. Victoria sat behind the wheel of her BMW X5, now 5 years old, with a long scratch along the rear panel she had never bothered to repair. She didn't start the engine. Instead, she stared at the steering wheel. "She built a company, Mom," Victoria said finally. Her voice cracked on the word company. A real company. People stood up for her. 400 people clapped. "She got lucky," my mother replied automatically. It was the same script she had been repeating for 30 years. "Lucky?" Victoria snapped, turning toward her. "We got $320,000, and I can't sell a house without losing money. Nathan won't answer my calls after 9 o'clock. I moved to a city where I don't know anyone." Her voice fractured. "And she stood on that stage and had everything." A long silence filled the car. "Mom," Victoria whispered, "why don't I have that?" The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. My mother looked down at her perfectly manicured hands. "I did what I thought was best," she said quietly. "For who?" Victoria asked. The engine didn't start for a long time. 3 days after the gala, an email arrived. Not a text, not a voicemail, an email. Because my father was the kind of man who needed paragraphs to say the things he could never speak out loud. "Hermina, someone posted a clip of your speech online. I've watched it 11 times. I counted because your mother would say I'm exaggerating, and I want to be precise for once. I should have stood up for you at the wedding. I should have said something when your mother handed you that envelope. I should have stood up for you your entire life. Every Thanksgiving, every phone call, every time she compared you to Victoria while I sat there eating my dinner like a coward. That's what I was, a coward. I want to name it because I think you deserve to hear me say it. I won't ask you to forgive me. I'll just ask if you'd let me try to be better. If you ever want to have coffee, I'll fly to Nashville. No conditions, no agenda. Just your dad being late to the only conversation that matters. I love you. I always did. I was just too quiet about it." Dad. I read the message sitting at my desk inside the Coleman Creative Group office. Morning sunlight poured through the glass door, and the shadow of our company name stretched across the polished concrete floor. I read the email once, then again. Then I closed my laptop, placed both hands on the desk, and took a long breath. And I cried. But not the way I had cried months earlier on the bathroom floor when everything felt like it might collapse. This time the tears were different. They were the kind that come when something you stopped hoping for suddenly arrives anyway. Late, imperfect, but real. That evening I replied to my father's email. "I'd like that, but coffee only, and we take it slow." Albert booked a flight to Nashville that same night. Later, he sent a short follow-up message with one more sentence. "Your mother has been quiet since the gala. She hasn't said your name. For the first time in her life, I think she finally heard herself." 2 weeks after the gala, Victoria's life collapsed. Not dramatically, not with shouting or broken glass, with an iPad left on a kitchen counter. The details reached me gradually through Aunt Margaret, who had somehow become the family's unofficial news service. Nathan Whitaker had been seeing a nurse practitioner at the hospital. Not rumors, not speculation. Actual messages. 6 months of them. The conversations had synced automatically to the iPad Nathan had left charging beside the coffee machine. Victoria opened it one morning looking for a recipe app. Instead, she found the messages. She filed for legal separation the following week. Tennessee is a community property state, which meant the financial mess from selling their old house had to be divided equally. The remaining debts, credit lines, car payments, everything. The attorney's retainer alone was $15,000. Victoria didn't have that kind of cash available. Her dermatology license hadn't transferred yet, and Nathan had been the primary earner since their move. So she called my mother first. "Mom, I need help. Can you and Dad—" "We already gave you $320,000, Victoria," my mother interrupted. "We don't have more. Your father is retired now. We have our own expenses." The same woman who had funded a lavish wedding suddenly had nothing left to offer. Whether she couldn't help or simply wouldn't, the result was the same. The vault was closed. Then Victoria called me. I didn't answer. I was in a client meeting, a legitimate reason, though I'm not sure I would have picked up anyway. Her voicemail sat on my phone for 3 hours before I listened. "Hermina, it's Victoria. I know I don't deserve to call you, but I don't know who else to call." That evening, Daniel found me sitting on the couch with my phone in my lap, staring into space. "I'm not going to rescue her," I said quietly. "But I'm not going to gloat either." Daniel nodded. "That's the right line," and I held that line. 1 month after the gala, Coleman Creative Group signed its largest contract yet, a full rebrand for a chain of 8 boutique hotels across the Smoky Mountains region. Website redesign, social media campaigns, email marketing funnels, photography direction, the entire package. Contract value, $420,000, phased over 12 months. Soon after, the Nashville Business Review published a feature about the company. The headline read, "How Hermina Coleman Built a $2.8 million agency in 2 years without outside funding." The journalist, Olivia Bennett, had attended the 40 Under 40 gala. During our interview, she asked about my background. I told her the truth, just without the names. I explained that I had come from a family that didn't believe in my career path. She summarized it this way in the article. Coleman launched Coleman Creative Group with no outside investment, no family backing, and no safety net, just a laptop and the conviction that her work had value. That same month, we placed a billboard downtown as part of a marketing campaign for new hospitality clients. The design was simple. Coleman Creative Group. A photo of a luxury hotel lobby we had redesigned. Tagline, "Your story told right." I approved the location for business reasons, but I'd be lying if I said I hadn't noticed something. The billboard stood only 6 blocks from Victoria's rental apartment, right along the road she drove each morning to the temporary clinic where she had started consulting. Sometimes I wonder about something. If my mother had given me $320,000 instead of $800, would I still be here today? Would I have moved to Nashville? Would I have registered an LLC at a kitchen table with almost no money left? Or would I have taken the easier road and never discovered what I was capable of? I don't know the answer. But I do think the fire mattered more than the money. What do you think? Sometimes the worst things that happen to us end up pushing us toward the life we were meant to build. My father kept his word about coffee. He insisted on keeping it simple. No family meeting, no therapy session, no ambush, just coffee. We met at a small cafe in 12 South, only a few blocks from the shop where I had once poured lattes for $12 an hour. I arrived first. Black coffee, seat facing the door. 2 years had taught me to see what was coming. My mother walked in exactly at 10. Her hair had more silver in it now. She wore a Burberry trench coat over a white blouse, but the handbag she carried was the same Coach purse she had owned for years. Something about the combination told me everything. The armor was still there, but the resources behind it had thinned. She sat down and ordered green tea, wrapping both hands around the mug, as if she needed something to steady herself. "You look well," she said. "I am well." Silence settled between us while the espresso machine hissed behind the counter. A woman at the next table pretended to read a novel while clearly listening. "I didn't think you could do it," my mother said finally. There was no cruelty in her voice this time, just honesty. Maybe I was wrong. I let those words hang in the air. They were the closest thing to acknowledgement she had ever offered me. "You were," I replied. "But I didn't build my company to prove you wrong." I paused. I built it because I needed to prove something to myself. Then I took a breath and said the one thing that mattered most. I don't need an apology, Mom. What I need is for you to stop telling people I left because I was jealous. That's the minimum. She nodded slowly. Her eyes reddened. Not quite tears. My mother never cried easily, but it was the closest I had ever seen Frances Coleman come to that edge. If you want to know me, I said quietly, the real me, we can start with coffee, once a month. She looked up. But the ranking system is over, I continued. You don't get to compare your daughters anymore. 2 cups sat on the wooden table between us. Same size, same saucer. No one's bigger. 6 months after that first coffee, the situation looked different. My mother and I had met 4 times at the same cafe in 12 South. Always coffee, always short conversations, 30 minutes, sometimes 40. She asked about the business. I shared what I wanted to share. And not once did she compare me to Victoria. I couldn't tell whether she had truly changed or was simply performing change. Eventually, I realized that question wasn't mine to answer. My job was to hold the boundary. Her job was to respect it. My father flew to Nashville in January. He met Daniel and me at a picnic table outside a barbecue restaurant downtown. A tray of brisket sat on brown paper between us. Halfway through the meal, my father started crying. Not dramatically. Albert never did anything dramatically, but quietly, shoulders shaking while he pressed a napkin to his eyes. I'm proud of you, he said. I should have been saying that for 30 years. I reached across the table and held his hand. Daniel slid another slice of brisket onto his plate. Eat, Albert, he said gently. It's better when it's warm. My father laughed through his tears. It was the best meal I'd had since moving to Nashville. Victoria's divorce finalized in March. She sold what remained of the shared assets, absorbed the $60,000 loss from the house, and moved into a small apartment in East Nashville. 800 square feet. No marble counters, no wolf range. She worked 3 days a week, consulting at a dermatology clinic while waiting for her Tennessee license to transfer. For the first time in her life, she was paying her own electricity bill. In April, she texted me. I'm sorry for what I said at the wedding, and for the Instagram post. I was protecting something that was never real. I replied the next morning. I know. If you ever want to get coffee, let me know. No dramatic reunion, no emotional speeches, just 2 sisters finally standing on level ground. It's a Tuesday morning now. I'm standing inside the Coleman Creative Group office. The space has expanded to 1,500 square feet, stretching into the suite next door. 6 employees, 2 conference rooms, a wall of framed client projects that Melissa calls our gallery. Morning sunlight comes through the glass front door, and the company logo casts its shadow across the polished concrete floor, just like it did the first day we opened. Except now there are more desks, more chairs, more proof that something once imagined on an air mattress became real. On the wall behind my desk, 3 things are pinned. The LLC certificate from 2 years ago, slightly creased at the corners. The $2,100 check from Ronald Bishop, the first client who canceled. The first real payment. The first real lesson. My note in black marker still sits beside it. First real payment. First real lesson. And the Crystal Award from the Nashville Business Review, 40 under 40. Every afternoon around 4, the sunlight hits it just right, and small rainbows scatter across the filing cabinet. Melissa says it's the best decoration in the office. I think she's right. The $800 check from my mother isn't on the wall. I tore it up a long time ago. I don't keep reminders of what someone thought I was worth. I keep reminders of what I built. Daniel walks into the office carrying 2 coffees, one black, one with oat milk. He places mine on the desk, kisses the top of my head, and sits down across from me. We look out the window toward the street. The Coleman Creative Group billboard is still standing, your story told right. Below it, Nashville moves the way it always does, fast, bright, and completely indifferent to who you used to be before you arrived. My mother once handed me $800 and told me that was all I deserved. In a strange way, she was right about one thing. I did deserve exactly what I received. Not the $800, the fire. Some people inherit their legacy. I built mine. And I built it using the two things my parents never gave me: belief and a fair chance. That's my story. If there is one thing I hope people take from my story, it's this: being underestimated does not define your future. For most of my life, I believed the quiet roles my family had assigned to us. My sister was the pride of the family, the investment, the one everyone celebrated. I was the other one, the daughter people politely forgot to mention. When you hear that message often enough, you start to shrink yourself to fit it. But sometimes the moment that hurts you the most becomes the moment that frees you. The night my mother handed me that small check, I thought I was being told what I was worth. What I didn't understand then was that it was actually the beginning of my independence. When you leave the place where people measure you too small, you finally have room to grow. I didn't build my life to prove anyone wrong. I built it because I needed to discover who I was without their limits. Success for me wasn't the company or the awards. It was learning that my value never depended on someone else's approval. So if you've ever felt like the other one, remember this: sometimes the greatest gift life gives you is the freedom to build your own worth. Before this story ends, I want to say something from the heart. If you stayed with me all the way to the end, thank you. Stories like this are not just about revenge or success. They are about finding the courage to keep going when the people who were supposed to believe in you didn't. And if you have ever felt like the other one in your own family, I hope this story reminded you that your future is still yours to build. If this story resonated with you in any way, please take a moment to like the video. It helps more people discover stories like this. I'd also really love to hear from you, so leave a comment below and tell me where you're watching from, or what part of this story stayed with you the most. Your messages mean more than you might realize. And if you think someone you know might need to hear this message today, please share this story with them. Finally,